Show you another method of ripping polished panels by using a hot wire cutter. And this is a little cheapy table saw that I cut up and made a custom hot wire cutter for ripping the poly panels. So what I did is I took a piece of 3/4 inch conduit and I bend it with a conduit bender, and I attached it to the bottom of the table saw table. And you'll notice I got two guides on here. The one guide I just leave set up just for putting the groove in the poly panel. And this guide I can move back and forth for ripping whatever size I want. So after you bend the conduit, I run an extension cord, and I split the extension cord, and I'll run the hot wire, the black wire, this way, and I'll run the white around the bottom, and it runs all the way around the back side of the table saw, you can see here. And on the end of that wire, I just got alligator clamps or clips, and I just hooked them onto the wire. Now, this is a resistance. This is nichrome wire in between here. And nichrome wire is a resistance wire. So when you run electricity through here, it hits this wire and goes down to the other clamp where it's connected, and this will get glowing red hot or glowing orange. You have to have a spring tension on this wire because when it heats up, it expands and it'll get really loose. So you always have to have spring tension. I attached the spring to a hole I drilled in a bolt, so I can then adjust the spring tension as much as I want to add more tension. I have adjustment on the top and on the bottom. So this wire cannot touch metal anywhere along the line or these clamps, or it'll short out. But one very important thing I want to point out is this extension cord does not get plugged into a wall outlet. If you plug it into 110, it'll just burn this wire right off, almost instantly. This will actually get plugged into a transformer. It's very important that the power going to the hot wire cutter gets plugged into a transformer. You cannot plug that directly into a wall outlet, or it'll burn that wire right off. What this transformer does is it will transform 110 volts down to 12 volts, and instead of 20 amps running through that line, or 30 amps depending on what you have in the house, it'll transfer. We only need 5 amps of electricity or you'll burn that wire off. This transformer is actually made for a much bigger wire cutter, but it'll work on a small one like this. It's just not going to work. You're not going to turn it on by very much. So this unit, the transformer unit, that gets plugged into 110. Now, when I turn this on, I got electricity that's going to start flowing to this wire. So I'm going to watch this wire, and when I turn it on, then I start turning up the knob, which increases the voltage and the amps going to the hot wire. If I put a piece of foam up there, I can see already it's starting to melt. So I know I'm getting heat to it. Now when I adjust it, I just turn it up. You can see it smoking, it's melting off the foam on there. When you start seeing, turn it up, if you get it to a cherry red, that's as hot as you want to go. If I turn it up too much, it'll get orange and it'll burn off. So the highest you ever go is orange and cherry red. And then you're ready to cut. Now, as you run polystyrene through it, it'll also help cool it down. So I got my temperature set where I want it. Now I can go ahead and rip a poly panel. So this is much slower than cutting with a table saw or a cordless skill saw, but it's also much cleaner and much safer. So you don't have any polystyrene beads blowing around, and the people that aren't as handy with a saw are less frightened in cutting with a hot wire cutter. As a matter of fact, it's pretty safe because you can actually touch this wire and you're not going to get hurt. The only way you would get burnt is if you held your finger against it. Then obviously you would get a little burn. So it's actually kind of fun cutting with a hot wire cutter, I think. When I train guys on job sites and they get to use the hot wire cutter, most all of the employees prefer the hot wire cutter versus the saw because of the polystyrene dust and the safety. Now the reason I built it out of this little table is because you always have to groove the end of the panel. So when I get done hot wire cutting it, then I can groove it. So there we go. The wire's done. Shut off the machine. Now the hot wire's cooled down and you get a nice smooth cut. Now all you have to do is groove it, and that's what this is set up for.